Have you ever worked somewhere for years, pouring your soul into every project, only to watch someone else walk away with the credit?
To a wonderful
Today's
evening,
story is about a
Cheers to
man who
that.
was invisible for
and
6
many more.
years until one night, one woman
This
and
view
one
is
public
incredible,
gesture
isn't it?
changed
Not as
everything.
incredible as you.
Stay
You're
until the
sweet.
end to
Only
see
for
how
you.
the single father went from the office ghost to the man everyone feared. The Crystal Bay Charity Gala was the kind of event where people measured their worth by proximity to power. Chandeliers that probably cost more than Daniel Pierce's annual salary hung from vaulted ceilings, casting fractured light across marble floors so polished you could see your failures reflected back at you. Men in custom suits that fit like second skin stood in tight clusters, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, performing the elaborate theater of being important. Daniel stood near the bar, nursing a gin and tonic he'd been holding for 20 minutes, watching the whole performance with the detached observation of someone who'd learned to be a ghost in expensive rooms. He was 32 years old, and he looked tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. The suit he wore was good. He'd bought it 3 years ago for another event like this, back when he still thought showing up mattered. But it didn't fit quite right anymore. He'd lost weight. Not the intentional kind from gym memberships and meal prep, but the slow erosion that comes from skipping lunch because you're buried in spreadsheets from standing at the kitchen counter eating whatever's fastest while your kids do homework at the table behind you. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, already knowing what he'd see. Mrs. Valdez, his neighbor. "Just put them down. Lily asked for you. Told her you'd be home soon." Daniel typed back quickly. "Thanks. Be there by 10. He glanced at his watch. 8:47. He could probably slip out now. No one would notice. No one had noticed him arrive. The voice came from beside him before he could move. Daniel's shoulders tensed as Graham Mitchell materialized with expensive scotch in hand, that practiced smile already in place. Graham was a senior VP at Sterling Financial, the kind of guy who'd perfected the art of taking credit for other people's work while making it look like leadership. Graham's eyes scanned the room even while he spoke. "Didn't expect to see you here." And there was something in his tone, not quite surprise, not quite condescension, but somewhere in that space between them. Daniel kept his voice even. "Got the invitation, same as everyone else." Right. Of course." Graham took a sip of his drink. "You here with anyone?" "No." "Ah." Graham nodded slowly, like this confirmed something. "Yeah, these things are tough solo. Expensive, too." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. "I know what the tickets cost, Graham." Sure, just saying." Graham paused, and Daniel could see him weighing whether to continue. He did. "Look, I wanted to mention the Vandermeer analysis you put together last week. Really solid work." Daniel said nothing, just waited. "We ended up presenting it to the client yesterday. Went over really well. They were impressed." The question came out quiet. "Who presented it?" Graham's smile flickered just for a second. "Well, the team. You know how these things work. It's collaborative. I worked on that analysis for 6 weeks alone. You told me it was exploratory, that nobody else was going to see it." "Come on, Daniel, don't be like that. This is how the industry works. You contribute to the team. The team presents to the client. Rising tide lifts all boats." Daniel's voice stayed level. "Whose boat got lifted, Graham?" The smile was gone now. "I'm not doing this with you, not here." "Doing what?" "Having a conversation about who actually does the work." Graham leaned in slightly, voice dropping. "You want some advice? This attitude right here? This is why you're still at your level while other people are moving up. It's not always about being the smartest guy in the room, Daniel. Sometimes it's about knowing how to play the game." Daniel felt that land somewhere deep. Not anger. He'd been angry at the firm for years, and anger was exhausting. This was something quieter, something like resignation mixed with a clarity he'd been avoiding. The words came out flat. "I need to go. Party's just getting started. I have kids at home." Graham's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy if it weren't so performative. "Right, the single dad thing. That's tough, man, really. But you know," he gestured vaguely at the room full of people networking, connecting, building the relationships that would determine who got promoted and who stayed stuck. "You can't build a career from the sidelines. At some point you have to ask yourself what you're prioritizing. Daniel looked at him for a long moment, seeing clearly what he'd been trying not to see for 6 years. I know exactly what I'm prioritizing. He turned and started walking toward the exit, weaving through clusters of people who didn't see him. He'd gotten maybe 10 feet when he heard someone call his name. Not Graham this time, but Marcus Rivera, one of the junior analysts who'd started the same year as Daniel and was now somehow 3 levels above him. Marcus was walking over with 2 other guys from the firm, all of them flushed with the particular energy that comes from an open bar. And good news. "Hey Daniel, hold up." Daniel stopped, turned. "Dude, did you hear about the Cordova account?" "No." "We landed it. Full portfolio restructuring 5-year contract. Robert's calling it the biggest win of the quarter." Daniel felt something twist in his stomach. The Cordova account. He'd spent February and March building the risk assessment model from scratch, running scenarios until his eyes burned, mapping exposure vectors that most firms wouldn't even think to check. Marcus was still talking. "You worked on the preliminary analysis for that, right? Back in what, March?" "February. I spent 2 months building the risk assessment model." Right. Well, it paid off, man. This is huge for the firm." One of the other guys chimed in. Daniel didn't remember his name. "Robert said the model was a game changer in the pitch. Client loved it." The question came out quiet. "Who presented?" Marcus hesitated just for a second. Robert took the lead. Graham supported. It was a team effort, though. A team effort. "Look, I get it." Marcus had that careful tone people use when they're about to say something they think is generous, but is actually just insulting. "I know you put in a lot of work on the back end. That matters. It all matters. But the reality is, not everyone's built for the client-facing stuff. Some people are better in the engine room, you know. That's not a bad thing." Daniel stared at him. "I'm good with clients, Marcus." "Sure. Yeah. I just mean you've got other priorities. The kids, all that. It makes sense that you'd focus on the technical side." The third guy jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "What Marcus means is everyone has their lane. You're solid in yours." Daniel repeated the word slowly. "My lane." "Don't take it wrong, man. We all respect what you do." Daniel wanted to laugh, but it would have come out wrong, too sharp, too bitter. These people didn't respect what he did. They respected what he let them take. His voice came out flat. "I need to get home." "Yeah, of course. Hey, we should grab drinks sometime. Catch up." "Sure." He turned again and headed for the elevator, moving faster now, just wanting to be out of this room full of people who saw right through him. He pressed the button and waited, watching the numbers descend. 7th floor, 5th, 3rd. His phone buzzed. Not Mrs. Valdez this time. A notification from Quant Minds, the anonymous finance forum he'd joined 4 months ago. Someone had responded to his post about behavioral finance and market psychology. Athena_insight. Still thinking about your breakdown of the psychological component. You were right. Most people miss it entirely. They treat market irrationality like it's a bug instead of a fundamental feature. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. He'd been exchanging messages with Athena for months now, mostly late at night after the kids were asleep, debating about efficient market theory, risk modeling, the mathematics of uncertainty. She was brilliant, probably the sharpest analytical mind he'd encountered outside of academic journals. They'd never met in person, didn't know each other's real names, where they worked, what they looked like, and somehow that made it easier. She saw his ideas clearly because there was nothing else to see. No tired face, no cheap suit, no single father limitations. Just thoughts. Just intelligence meeting intelligence. He typed back quickly. People want markets to be rational because irrational systems are harder to predict. But the unpredictability is what creates opportunity. You just have to be willing to see what everyone else is ignoring. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. Daniel stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors started to close. A voice called from the hallway, "Hold the elevator, please." Daniel's hand shot out, automatically triggering the sensor. The doors bounced back open. And that's when his life split into before and after. The woman who stepped into the elevator was the kind of person who changed the air pressure in a room just by existing. She was maybe 5'8" in heels that probably cost more than his rent, wearing a black dress that was somehow both simple and devastating, the kind of thing that looked effortless, but absolutely wasn't. Dark hair pulled back in a way that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her eyes, mid-30s, maybe younger, the kind of beautiful that came with power, or maybe the kind of power that made beauty irrelevant. Daniel recognized her immediately because everyone in finance recognized Victoria Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Capital. 30 years old and already managing a portfolio worth somewhere in the range of $40 billion. She'd started with a small inheritance from her grandfather and turned it into one of the most influential investment groups in the world through a combination of aggressive risk-taking and analytical precision that bordered on clairvoyant. She was also notoriously private. Rarely gave interviews, never attended events like this. Except apparently she did, because she was standing 3 feet away from him in an elevator. Daniel stepped back to give her space. She moved to the opposite side of the elevator, pressed the lobby button, even though it was already lit, and stood perfectly still, looking straight ahead. The doors closed. The elevator began its descent. Silence. Daniel's heart was doing something complicated. It wasn't attraction, or not just attraction. It was more like the feeling you get when you're suddenly in the presence of someone who exists on a completely different frequency than the rest of the world, someone whose choices ripple outward in ways most people will never experience. He glanced at her peripherally. She was looking at her phone, scrolling through something with the focused intensity of someone who was never really off the clock. The elevator passed the 6th floor. 5th. A voice in his head suggested, "Say something." Another voice countered immediately. "Don't say anything. You're nobody to her. She probably doesn't even know you're here." 4th floor. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but something close. Her thumbs moved across the screen, quickly typing something. Daniel's pocket buzzed. He froze. No. He pulled out his phone slowly, already knowing what he'd see, but needing to confirm it anyway. Athena_insight. The invisible edges are where the real value hides. I like that phrasing. It's true in more context than just markets. Daniel stared at the message, then at Victoria, then at the message again. The elevator dinged. 2nd floor. He looked up. Victoria was watching him now, phone still in her hand, and there was something in her expression that was both terrifying and electrifying. Her voice came out calm, certain. "You're Daniel Pierce." It wasn't a question. His mouth was dry. "Yes." "I'm Victoria." "I know. I know you know." A pause. "The question is whether you figured out the rest yet." The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Neither of them moved. Daniel's voice came out quiet. "Athena." She smiled, then a real smile, not the polished corporate version. "I was wondering if you'd put it together before or after I introduced myself. How long have you known that you're Daniel Pierce?" "About 6 weeks. You mentioned the Cordova risk assessment in one of our conversations, very specific piece of work. I made some calls, found out who built the model." She tilted her head slightly. "You're better than your position suggests. You looked into me." "I look into everyone I find interesting." She stepped out of the elevator, turned back. "Are you leaving?" Daniel's brain was moving through about 7 different thoughts simultaneously. This was Athena, the woman he'd been talking to for months, the woman whose mind he'd come to respect more than almost anyone he'd encountered professionally. And she was Victoria Ashford, billionaire, one of the most powerful people in the industry, and she just asked if he was leaving. The words came out before he'd fully processed them. "I was." "Change your mind. Walk with me." It wasn't really a request. She was already moving back toward the ballroom, and Daniel found himself following before he'd consciously decided to do so. They walked through the lobby, and then Victoria did something that made Daniel's stomach drop. Instead of heading toward some quiet corner or private room, she walked directly back into the ballroom, the main floor where everyone could see them. And she didn't just walk. She took his hand. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Daniel felt the weight of maybe 200 pairs of eyes landing on him, watching Victoria Ashford. Victoria Ashford walked across the room holding hands with the guy from Sterling Financial, who usually left these things early to get home to his kids. Graham Mitchell's face went pale. Robert Chen, the managing director, actually took a step forward like he was going to intercept them, then seemed to think better of it. Victoria led Daniel to one of the quieter sections near the windows overlooking the city. Only when they were away from the densest clusters of people did she let go of his hand. Daniel's voice came out low. "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" "You know what?" She looked at him directly. "You've spent months being invisible to those people. I thought it might be interesting to see what happens when you're suddenly visible." "Interesting for who?" "Both of us." She glanced back at the room where people were still staring, still trying to make sense of what they just witnessed. "They're going to treat you differently now. Tomorrow, next week. They'll wonder what our relationship is, whether they missed something important, whether you have access or influence they didn't account for. I don't want that." "Don't you?" She turned back to him. "You've been producing exceptional work for years and getting nothing for it. No recognition, no advancement, no respect. Now they'll notice. They'll have to. Because they think I know you. Because they know you know me. There's a difference." She paused. "Tell me something. In all our conversations, did you ever lie to me?" "No." "Did you ever exaggerate your expertise or pretend to know something you didn't?" "No." "That's rare. Most people can't help themselves. They need to seem impressive, so they inflate, they posture, they perform." She smiled slightly. "You just talked about the work. The ideas, like the person on the other end was someone who'd see through bullshit anyway, so why bother? I thought you were a grad student or something, someone who cared about the concepts." "I'm someone who cares about the concepts. I'm also someone who has $40 billion to deploy based on those concepts." She gestured subtly toward the room behind them. "Most of the people here don't understand the difference between intelligence and credentialing. They see your lack of title and assume lack of capability. They're wrong, but they won't realize they're wrong until someone they respect tells them to look again. So this is charity. No, this is pattern recognition." Victoria's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "I've built my career on finding asymmetries, places where perceived value and actual value don't match. You're an asymmetry, Daniel, a meaningful one." Daniel felt something complicated happening in his chest. Part of him wanted to believe her. Part of him knew better than to trust powerful people who showed sudden interest. The question came out quiet. "What do you want from me?" "Right now, a conversation. We've been having them for months. I'd like to continue, just without the anonymity. And later depends on what happens now." She glanced at her phone briefly. "I have about 20 minutes before I need to leave. Tell me about your kids." The shift in topic was so abrupt it took Daniel a second to adjust. "My kids. You mentioned them once. 3 children, I think. You were explaining why you couldn't take a call after 8. Lily's 9. The twins Jacob and Sarah just turned 6. Their mother's not in the picture." It wasn't a question, but Daniel answered anyway, keeping his voice flat the way he always did because emotion made people uncomfortable. "She left when the twins were 2 months old." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. "That's a lot." "It's what it is. You're doing it alone. I have some help. Mrs. Valdez watches them when I have to work late. But yeah, mostly alone." "And you're still doing the work you do at the firm." And Daniel felt the truth of it land. "The work is the easy part. Numbers make sense. Markets make sense, even when they're irrational. There's logic to the irrationality. Kids are harder. They want things I can't always give them. Time, mostly. Attention. You feel guilty. Every single day." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then her voice came out clear and direct. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly. The people who took credit for your Cordova work, they have nannies, housekeepers, assistants who manage their lives so they can focus on performing competence at events like this. You're building financial models at midnight after putting 3 kids to bed and still producing work better than theirs. That's not a disadvantage. That's evidence of capacity they don't have. Doesn't feel like capacity when I'm missing Lily's school play because I'm stuck in a meeting for a project someone else is going to present. Then stop missing the plays. I need the job. You need a job, not necessarily that one. She checked her phone again. I have to go, but I want to continue this conversation. Are you free for coffee this week? Daniel's brain was still trying to process the last 3 minutes. Coffee or lunch? Dinner if you can get coverage for the kids. Why? Because I think you're interesting. Because our conversations have been the most intellectually engaging part of my week for the last 4 months. Because I'm curious what it would look like if someone with your analytical capability actually had resources and support. She pulled out her phone, handed it to him. Put your number in. He did, fingers moving on autopilot. She took the phone back, sent him a text immediately. So you have mine, I'll reach out tomorrow. We'll find a time. And then she walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone near the windows, while the entire ballroom tried very hard to pretend they weren't staring at him. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, phone in his hand, brain attempting to compile what had just happened into something coherent. Then Graham appeared at his elbow. The voice came out careful, recalibrated. Daniel, hey, can we talk for a second? Daniel turned slowly. Graham's expression was different now, still calculated but adjusted for new information. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd made a significant miscalculation and was trying to figure out how to correct it. What's up, Graham? I just wanted to talk about earlier. I think maybe I came across wrong. This Cordova thing, the Vandermeer analysis, I want to make sure you're getting proper recognition for your contributions. Daniel stared at him. 30 minutes ago you told me I needed to learn how to play the game. I was talking about visibility, collaboration. I didn't mean you meant exactly what you said, Graham. Come on, don't be like that. We're on the same team here. Are we? Robert Chen materialized on Daniel's other side, managing director smile in place. Daniel, good to see you. Didn't realize you knew Victoria Ashford. I didn't until tonight. But you do now, apparently. Robert and Graham exchanged a glance that Daniel could read perfectly, two men trying to recalculate value in real time, trying to figure out if they'd just lost something or if there was still a play to be made. Robert cleared his throat. Listen, we should probably set up some time to talk about your trajectory at the firm, about opportunities. Opportunities. We've been thinking about expanding the quant team. Someone with your background, your skill set there, could be a place for you in a more prominent role. You've been thinking about this for a while now. Yes. Since when? Robert's smile tightened. Since 20 minutes ago. Daniel felt something crystallize inside him, something that had been forming for 6 years but was only now taking solid shape. I need to get home to my kids. Of course, but let's definitely talk this week. Maybe lunch. Maybe. He walked away before either of them could say anything else, heading for the elevator again. This time nobody stopped him. On the ride down he pulled out his phone and looked at the text Victoria had sent. Just her number, no message, simple, direct. Then he opened his conversation with Mrs. Valdez. Daniel, on my way, be there in 20. Mrs. Valdez, no rush, they're sleeping. Lily wanted me to tell you she finished her science project. Daniel, thanks, really I owe you. Mrs. Valdez, you don't owe me anything. Get home safe. The elevator opened into the lobby. Daniel walked out into the Miami heat, humid air hitting him like a wall after the air-conditioned precision of the ballroom. His car was parked 3 blocks away. He'd walked rather than pay for valet because $40 was $40, and money had a different weight when you were feeding 3 kids on a budget that involved a lot of generic brand cereal and planning meals 2 weeks in advance. He walked slowly, letting his brain settle. The night felt different than it had 2 hours ago. Heavier, stranger, like reality had shifted slightly to the left and he was still trying to find his balance. Victoria Ashford was Athena, the anonymous person he'd been talking to for months. The person whose intelligence he respected more than almost anyone in the industry was one of the most powerful women in finance, and she'd taken his hand in front of everyone who'd spent years pretending he didn't exist. Daniel unlocked his car, got in, started the engine. The AC sputtered to life, blowing lukewarm air that would eventually get cold if he gave it enough time. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He opened it. Victoria. This is Victoria, confirming you have my contact. Also, those people at the firm who are suddenly interested in your career, they're not worth the effort. But we'll talk about that later. Get home to your kids. Daniel read the message twice, then 3 times. Then he put the car in drive and headed home where 3 children were sleeping in a 2-bedroom apartment, and life was exactly as complicated as it had been 6 hours ago, except now, something had changed in a way he couldn't quite name yet. The next morning started the way every morning started, chaos barely contained. Lily couldn't find her science textbook. Jacob had somehow gotten toothpaste in his hair. Sarah refused to wear anything except her purple dress, which was in the laundry because she'd worn it 3 days in a row already. Daniel moved through the apartment like a conductor managing an orchestra where nobody could read music and half the instruments were on fire. Lily, it's under your bed. It's not. It is. I can see it from here. This is toothpaste hair now. This is my life. Dad, the purple dress is my favorite. I know, that's why you've worn it 70 times. Sweater. He got them dressed, fed, and out the door with approximately 90 seconds to spare before they'd be late for school. The morning drop-off was its own choreography. Riverside Elementary first for Lily, then Little Scholars Daycare for the twins. Lily hugged him before getting out of the car. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Lil. Tell Mrs. Patterson I'll email her about the field trip. You forgot? I didn't forget. I'm going to email her today. Yes, today. She looked skeptical but nodded and headed toward the building, backpack almost as big as she was. The twins were easier. They were at the age where everything was a game and nothing was a crisis unless it involved lost toys or denied cookies. Daniel watched them disappear into the daycare, waited until he saw them wave from the window, then pulled back into traffic and headed toward the office. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on Bluetooth. Daniel Pierce. Mr. Pierce, this is Jennifer Wu from HR. Mr. Chen would like to see you when you get in. Do you have time around 9? Daniel glanced at the clock. 8:47. Sure. Great. I'll put you on his calendar. Conference room C. She hung up before he could ask what it was about. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Robert Chen didn't schedule morning meetings through HR unless it was serious. Good serious or bad serious remained to be seen. He got to the office at 8:55, dropped his bag at his desk, grabbed coffee from the break room that tasted like it had been brewed sometime yesterday, and headed to conference room C. Robert was already there along with Graham and Patricia Brennan, the firm's COO. This wasn't a casual conversation. Robert gestured to a chair. Daniel, thanks for coming. Coffee. I'm good. Great. So we wanted to follow up on our conversation last night about your role here, opportunities for growth, that kind of thing. Daniel sat down, said nothing. Patricia jumped in. We've been reviewing your work over the past year, really over the past several years, and we're impressed. The Cordova model, the Vandermeer analysis, the risk assessment work you did for the Patterson account, it's all top tier. Thank you. We haven't done a great job of acknowledging that publicly. Patricia's tone was smooth, practiced. That's on us. Leadership should be better about recognizing contributions, especially from people who aren't necessarily vocal about self-promotion. Okay. Graham leaned forward. Here's the thing, Daniel. The firm is growing. We're taking on bigger clients, more complex projects. We need people we can trust, people with serious analytical chops who can handle sophisticated work. Patricia slid a folder across the table. We'd like to offer you a promotion. Senior analyst with a focus on high-value accounts. 20% salary bump, profit sharing, and a real seat at the table when it comes to client strategy. Daniel looked at the folder but didn't open it. His voice came out careful. When did you decide this? Robert's expression stayed neutral. We've been discussing it for a few weeks. Weeks? Yes. Before or after last night? The room got very quiet. Robert held up a hand. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. Did this promotion exist before Victoria Ashford took my hand in front of everyone, or did it materialize this morning? Patricia's jaw tightened. Robert's voice stayed level. Let's keep this professional. Yes, last night reminded us that we need to be more proactive about retention, but the foundation of this offer is your work, your value to the firm. That hasn't changed. Daniel sat back. Right. And what exactly would the senior analyst position involve? Graham pulled out another folder. We're pitching Ashford Capital next month. Full portfolio partnership proposal. We want you to lead the technical analysis. There it was. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. You want me to work on the Ashford pitch? Graham's enthusiasm was calibrated perfectly. You're the best person for it. Your modeling work is exactly what they'd value. And given your connection with Ms. Ashford, it makes sense to have you in a prominent role. My connection? Robert leaned forward slightly. Look, we're not asking you to do anything inappropriate. We're just saying if you have insight into what Ashford Capital values, that's useful information. And if your involvement in the pitch demonstrates our commitment to quality, that's good for everyone. Daniel looked at the three of them. Robert with his managing director calm, Graham with his calculated enthusiasm, Patricia with her COO efficiency. He understood exactly what was being offered and exactly what it would cost. They wanted to use his relationship with Victoria to secure a deal. In exchange, they were offering him money, title recognition, everything he'd wanted for years. All he had to do was let them turn his integrity into leverage. The words came out quiet. I need to think about it. Robert nodded. Of course. Take the day. We'll talk tomorrow. Daniel stood up, walked out of the conference room, went back to his desk, and sat there staring at his computer screen without seeing it. His phone buzzed. Victoria. How's your morning? He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, complicated. Victoria, mine's about to get more complicated. Free for lunch. Daniel. Where Victoria? I'll send a car. Noon. Wear comfortable shoes. Daniel had no idea what that meant, but at noon exactly his phone pinged with a message that a car was waiting outside. He told his manager he was taking lunch, ignored Graham's curious glance, and went downstairs. The car was not subtle. Black SUV driver in a suit, the kind of vehicle that screamed money in a way that made Daniel deeply uncomfortable. The driver opened the door. Daniel got in. Victoria wasn't there this time. Just the driver, who nodded at him in the rearview mirror and pulled into traffic without saying anything. They drove for maybe 20 minutes, leaving downtown, heading toward the coast. Eventually, the car pulled up to a small park overlooking the water, the kind of place that was technically public but empty on a Tuesday afternoon. Victoria was waiting on a bench wearing jeans and a white shirt, somehow looking more intimidating in casual clothes than she had in the gala dress. She stood as Daniel approached. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the cryptic invitation. She smiled slightly. Walk with me. They walked along the path in silence for a few minutes. The water was gray-blue, choppy with wind. Seabirds circled overhead looking for scraps. Victoria's voice came out calm, direct. Your firm offered you a promotion this morning. Daniel stopped walking. How do you know that? Because it's what I would do if I were them. They saw us together last night. This morning they're recalculating your value. They want me to work on the Ashford pitch. Of course they do. She turned to face him. Let me guess. Senior analyst position, salary bump, more responsibility, and all you have to do is use your relationship with me to help them secure a partnership. Something like that? Are you going to do it? Daniel looked out at the water. I don't know. Yes, you do. How would you know? Because you spent 4 months talking to me about finance without once trying to figure out who I was so you could leverage the connection. You're not wired for that kind of transaction. She paused. I need the money, Victoria. I've got 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm working 60-hour weeks just to keep us stable. If they're offering a 20% raise, they're offering you a 20% raise to compromise yourself. That's not opportunity. That's exploitation with better packaging. Daniel's voice came out sharp. Easy to say when you have $40 billion. Victoria didn't flinch. You're right. It is easy for me to say, but that doesn't make it untrue. She started walking again. Daniel fell into step beside her. Tell me something. When you're building a financial model, what's the first thing you do? Define the parameters, which means figure out what actually matters, what drives value, what creates risk, what the real variables are. And what do you do with noise? Strip it out. It obscures the signal. Victoria stopped walking, turned to face him fully. Right now you're treating your career like there's only one path. Stay at a firm that doesn't value you. Take whatever scraps they offer. Be grateful for recognition that only came because they think you're useful to them. That's noise, Daniel. It's obscuring the signal. What's the signal? That you're exceptional at what you do. That you've been building sophisticated models while raising 3 kids alone. That your work is better than people who get paid 3 times what you make. That's the signal. Everything else, the title, the politics, whether Graham thinks you're a team player, that's noise. Noise pays the bills. So does signal. You just have to know where to look. She pulled out her phone, showed him the screen. Compensation structure for senior analyst at Ashford Capital. Base salary $185,000. Performance bonus structure conservatively another $75,000 annually. Total $260,000. Daniel's breath caught. That was more than triple what he made now. That was private school if the kids needed it. That was moving out of the cramped apartment. That was breathing room he hadn't had in 6 years. Victoria's voice stayed level. That's not charity. That's market rate for someone with your capability who's actually being used at capacity level. Daniel handed the phone back. You're offering me a job. I'm telling you what exists. Whether you take it is your choice. I don't understand why you're doing this. Yes, you do. You're just not used to people acting on what they see. Victoria's pause stretched long enough that Daniel could hear the waves breaking against the rocks below. When she finally spoke, her voice carried that same analytical precision she brought to everything. I've spent 4 months watching you think. Watching you solve problems, challenge assumptions, build arguments most people in this industry couldn't construct if you gave them a month and a research team. That's valuable. I want valuable people working with me, not against me, and definitely not buried in firms too dysfunctional to recognize what they have. Daniel's throat felt tight. This is fast. Markets move fast. People who wait miss opportunities. She looked at him directly. But I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm asking you to think clearly about what your current firm is actually offering versus what they're asking you to trade for it. They walked back to the car in silence. The driver was waiting, door already open. Inside the SUV, Victoria's tone shifted slightly. They're going to pressure you, the firm. They'll make it seem like this promotion is your one chance. Like turning it down means throwing away your career. They'll use your kids, your financial situation, your fear. I need you to see that clearly. I do see it. Then see this too. You have options. You've always had options. You just haven't had anyone tell you that before. The car pulled up outside Sterling's building. Daniel got out, turned back. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Thank you. For lunch. For the conversation. Thank you for not using our relationship as leverage. It's rarer than you'd think. She smiled slightly. I'll text you later. Think about what I said. The car pulled away, leaving Daniel standing on the sidewalk with his phone in his hand and a decision crystallizing into something he couldn't see yet, but could feel forming. He went back inside, up the elevator, back to his desk where 7 new emails waited and a spreadsheet needed to be done by end of day. Graham appeared at his cubicle around 3. His expression was carefully neutral, the kind of practiced blank that came from years of corporate maneuvering. Hey, got a minute? They walked to an empty conference room. Graham closed the door. So, the promotion. You thinking about it? Daniel saved his mental calculation mid-thought. Yeah. Good. Look, I know this morning might have felt transactional. I want you to know it's not. We genuinely value your work here. Always have. The word came out flat. Okay. Graham leaned against the table. The Ashford thing, I know how it might seem, but here's reality. We're trying to build a relationship with one of the biggest investment firms in the world. If you can help us do that, everyone wins. You, me, the firm, the clients we'd be able to serve with that partnership. It's not about using you. It's about leveraging collective strengths. Daniel stayed silent, watching Graham's performance unfold with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this exact play before. Graham continued, "You've got kids to think about, stability, benefits. This promotion comes with better health care, 401k matching the works. That matters when you're a single parent." "It does." "So why the hesitation?" Daniel looked at him directly, and something in his expression must have shifted because Graham's carefully maintained neutrality flickered. "Because I've been here 6 years, Graham. 6 years of doing good work, having it ignored, watching other people get promoted while I stay in place. And suddenly, 12 hours after Victoria Ashford takes my hand at a party, you're all very interested in my career trajectory. You can call that whatever you want, but we both know what it is." Graham's jaw tightened. "You think you're the first person to benefit from a connection? This is how the industry works, Daniel. Relationships matter. If you've got one with Victoria Ashford, that's an asset. Using assets isn't exploitation, it's strategy. Even if the asset is a person. That's not what it's what you meant." Graham stood up, and for the first time since Daniel had known him, the mask slipped completely. "Look, I don't know what she's been telling you, but you need to understand something. She hasn't been telling me anything. I'm capable of thinking for myself." Graham moved toward the door. "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're about to turn down a life-changing opportunity because of pride. Maybe it is pride, or maybe it's knowing the difference between being valued and being used." Graham's hand was on the door handle now. "You know what your problem is, Daniel? You think the world owes you something because you're smart. It doesn't. Being smart isn't enough. You have to be smart and pragmatic. You have to be willing to do what it takes. I am willing to do what it takes, just not that. Then you're going to stay exactly where you are, and in 5 years you'll still be sitting in that cubicle wondering why everyone else moved past you." He left without waiting for a response. Daniel sat in the empty conference room for a long time, phone in his pocket, reality settling over him like a weight he'd been carrying for years but was only now fully acknowledging. That night, after the kids were in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a legal pad running the numbers. Current salary, $67,000. 20% raise would bring it to $80,400. Victoria's offer, $260,000. The math was brutally clear, but math was only part of the equation. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, you're still thinking. That's good. Take your time. But don't let fear make the decision." Daniel typed back, "How do you know I'm thinking, Victoria?" "Because I know how you think. You're building a model right now, running scenarios, trying to quantify risk." "Daniel, is that wrong, Victoria?" "No. It's exactly right. Just make sure you're measuring the right variables." "Daniel, which are, Victoria? What you're building versus what you're trading. Some things don't fit on a spreadsheet." Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Then he looked at the numbers on his legal pad. Then he looked at the door to his kids' bedrooms where 3 people were sleeping who depended entirely on whatever choice he made next. And he started to understand what Victoria had been trying to tell him. The signal wasn't about money. It was about what kind of life he was building, and whether that life required him to become smaller to fit into spaces that were never going to value him anyway. He picked up his phone and typed, "I need to talk to you. Not about the job. About how you knew." Victoria. "Knew what, Daniel?" "That I was worth finding." "Victoria, I'll tell you, but not over text. Tomorrow. Lunch again." "Daniel." "Okay." "Victoria, wear comfortable shoes." "Daniel." "You keep saying that." "Victoria, because where we're going next matters." Daniel put his phone down, turned off the light, and sat in the dark kitchen of his too-small apartment, feeling something shift inside him that didn't have a name yet, but felt like the moment before a decision becomes irreversible. Tomorrow, he'd talk to Victoria. Tomorrow, he'd figure out what he was actually choosing between. But tonight, in the quiet darkness with his children sleeping and the numbers still scattered on his legal pad, Daniel Pierce allowed himself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, being invisible wasn't the cost of survival. Maybe it was just what happened when you let other people decide what you were worth, and maybe it was time to stop letting them. The next morning arrived with the same chaos, but Daniel moved through it differently. He noticed things he usually missed. The way Lily's hair fell across her face when she concentrated on tying her shoes. How Jacob hummed while brushing his teeth. The particular shade of concentration in Sarah's eyes when she picked out her clothes. Small things. Things that mattered more than spreadsheets. Lily looked up from her cereal. "Dad, you're staring." "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how you're getting too tall. Stop growing." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "That's not how it works." "Should be. I should get a vote." Jacob spilled orange juice across the table. Sarah laughed. Daniel grabbed paper towels and cleaned it up without the usual flash of frustration, and Lily gave him a curious look. "You're being weird." "Weird how?" "I don't know. Different weird." "Good different or bad different?" She considered this seriously. "Not sure yet." He dropped them at school and daycare, watched them disappear into their respective buildings, then sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Sterling. He ignored them and drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks from work, ordered something that cost too much, and sat outside in the morning sun, waiting for noon. Graham texted at 9:15, "Need to finalize the promotion paperwork. Can you stop by when you get in?" Daniel didn't respond. Robert called at 9:40. Daniel let it go to voicemail. At 10:30, Patricia called. This time he answered. Her voice came through crisp and professional. "Daniel, listen, I know you're thinking about the offer and that's fine, but we need to move on this. The Ashford pitch timeline is tight. If you're going to be part of the team, we need to start prep this week." "I haven't decided yet." "What's there to decide? We're offering you everything you've been working toward." The question came out sharper than he intended. "Are you—" There was a pause on her end, the kind of calculated silence that preceded corporate precision. "I'm not sure I understand the question." "I've been working here 6 years, Patricia. 6 years of good work. Work that won other people promotions. And suddenly one conversation with Victoria Ashford, and you're all very interested in my career development. You don't see how that looks." Patricia's voice cooled by several degrees. "I see how it might feel. But Daniel, this is business. Relationships matter. If you have a connection that benefits the firm, that's valuable. That's how partnerships work. Partnerships where both sides benefit, or partnerships where one side gets used." Her tone shifted into something harder. "Look, I'm going to be direct with you. You're talented. Everyone knows that. But talent alone doesn't move careers forward. You need visibility, relationships, strategic positioning. We're trying to give you that. If you turn this down, you're making a choice about your future here." "What kind of choice?" "The kind that's hard to walk back from." Daniel felt something settle in his chest. Not anger, something colder and more clear-sighted. "Thanks for the clarity, Patricia. So, what's your answer?" "I'll let you know." He hung up before she could respond. At 11:45, a text came through from an unknown number, cars outside. "David." Daniel left money on the table, walked to the black SUV idling at the curb, and got in. David nodded in the rearview mirror and pulled into traffic without speaking. They drove for 30 minutes this time, leaving the city entirely, heading up the coast toward an area Daniel vaguely recognized as expensive in ways that didn't advertise themselves: old money neighborhoods where houses were set back from the road behind gates and tropical landscaping. Eventually, David turned onto a private drive that wound through palm trees and flowering bushes before opening up to reveal a house that was somehow both massive and understated. Modern architecture, all clean lines and glass, positioned to overlook the ocean. David parked. "She's on the deck. Straight through." Daniel got out, walked up to the front door, which was already open. Inside was all white walls and natural light, expensive art that looked like it had been chosen by someone who actually understood it, furniture that managed to be both minimal and comfortable. He walked through this house toward the sound of the ocean, stepped out onto a deck that stretched the width of the building, and found Victoria sitting at a table with her laptop open, phone to her ear, discussing West Coast portfolio exposure. She saw him held up one finger, finished the conversation. "Sorry. Crisis in San Francisco. Tech sector volatility. Sit." Daniel sat. The view was stunning, endless blue water, white sand, morning light turning everything sharp and clear. Victoria closed her laptop. "Coffee food. David can make anything." "I'm fine." She studied him. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't much. They called you this morning, multiple times." Daniel stopped mid-reach for the water glass. "How do you write? You would know." "I know how these things work. They're applying pressure, making you feel like this is your only chance." She paused. "What did they say?" "That if I turn down the promotion, I'm making a choice about my future." Patricia's exact words. "Which means they're threatening you." "They didn't use those words. They didn't need to. That's what corporate threats sound like when they come from HR." Victoria picked up her phone, dialed a number from memory. "Rebecca, I need you to conference now." 30 seconds later, a woman's voice came through the speaker. "What's the emergency?" "Daniel's old firm is threatening legal action if he leaves. Client solicitation, trade secrets, standard harassment package. I'm sending details now." Victoria was already typing on her laptop. "I want a response drafted by end of day. Make it clear if they pursue this, we'll countersue for defamation, abuse of process, and anything else that applies. And make sure they understand we have significantly more resources for prolonged litigation than they do." Rebecca's voice stayed level. "Understood. Daniel, I'll need everything. Employment contract, any analysis you built, communications with the old firm. Everything." Daniel felt reality shifting around him. "I'll send it this afternoon." "Do you want to go aggressive or measured?" Victoria's answer was immediate. "Aggressive. I want them to understand that threatening my people has consequences." "Done. Draft to you by 6. The line went dead. Victoria looked at Daniel. "This is going to be fine." "You don't know that." "I do. Because they're bluffing. They don't have a case. They're trying to scare you into backing down. It won't work." "What if they actually file?" "Then we bury them in discovery until they beg us to settle." She leaned forward. "Listen to me. This is what happens when you threaten established players. They don't compete on merit. They compete through intimidation. But you're not alone anymore. You have me. You have our legal team. And you have the truth on your side." Daniel's voice came out quieter than he intended. "They said they'd make sure every firm in the city knows what kind of person I am." "Let them try. Every firm in this city will know you're the person who built analysis so good it made senior management panic. That's not a reputation problem. That's a credential. That's not how they'll frame it." "They can frame it however they want. The work speaks for itself." Victoria stood, walked around the desk. "I know you're scared. You should be. They're trying to scare you. That's the point. But don't let fear make your decisions. You've already proven you're better than that." But what nobody in that room knew, not Graham, not Robert, not any of the people who'd ignored Daniel for 6 years, was that the most powerful woman in finance had been watching him. Not watching his resume, not watching his title, watching his mind. Daniel stood up, moved to the railing, looked out at the water. "You said you'd tell me how you knew I was worth finding. Walk with me." They went down steps from the deck to the beach, shoes off, walking along the waterline where the sand was firm and cool. The morning was still early enough that the heat hadn't settled in yet, just sun and breeze and the sound of waves. Victoria was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "I grew up with money. My grandfather made his fortune in manufacturing real estate, some early tech investments that paid off bigger than anyone expected. By the time I was born, there was enough money that I'd never have to work a day in my life if I didn't want to." "But you did." "Because money without purpose is just weight. It doesn't mean anything unless you do something with it." She bent down, picked up a shell, examined it, tossed it back into the water. "When I was 23, my grandfather died. Left me everything. Not my father, he'd already proven he was better at spending money than making it, but me. $10 million. What did you do with it?" Lost half of it in the first year. She said it matter-of-factly without shame. Made stupid investments, trusted the wrong advisors, thought being smart was the same as being experienced. It's not. Experience is what you get after you fail enough times to recognize patterns. So you learned. I got obsessed. Spent 2 years doing nothing but studying markets, reading everything I could find, building models, testing theories. I stopped going to parties, stopped maintaining friendships that were based on who my grandfather was. I just worked. She stopped walking. And slowly I started to understand how money actually moves, where the asymmetries hide, what creates value that other people miss. She turned to face the water. By the time I was 27, I'd turned that remaining 5 million into 100 million. By 30, it was $1 billion. Now it's 40-something depending on the day. That's not an accident. No, it's pattern recognition. It's understanding that most people in this industry are performing competence instead of actually being competent. They've learned the language, the signals, the way to look like they know what they're doing. But when you actually test their thinking, there's nothing there. Just noise dressed up as signal. She looked at him directly. And you think I'm different? I know you are. I've been watching you think for 4 months, remember? You don't perform. You just solve problems. You don't care if the solution makes you look smart. You care if it's correct. That's rare. The pause stretched long enough for a pelican to dive and come up empty. Rare enough that when I see it, I pay attention. So you looked into me. I did my research, yes. Found out who you were, where you worked, what your situation was. And the more I learned, the more interested I became. Not just in your analytical capability, but in the fact that you were doing that level of work while raising 3 kids alone, while being systematically overlooked by people who should have known better. Daniel stopped walking. Why does that matter to you? Victoria held his gaze. Because I've spent 10 years building a firm based on finding value where other people aren't looking. That's my entire strategy. And you, Daniel Pierce, are a massive asymmetry. You're someone with world-class capability being paid a fraction of market rate because your current employers are too stupid or too threatened to recognize what they have. So this is business. Everything's business. But that doesn't mean it can't also be personal. She started walking again. You asked me yesterday how I knew you were worth finding. Here's the real answer: I didn't know. I suspected. And suspicion is just a hypothesis that needs testing. So I tested it. Spent 4 months talking to you about ideas, watching how you thought, seeing if the quality of your mind matched the quality of your work. She paused. And it did. Better than I expected. And then you showed up at that gala. I was invited months ago. I almost didn't go. I hate those things, but I decided at the last minute it might be interesting to see you in person, to watch how you move through a room full of people who didn't see you, to confirm what I already suspected. She stopped walking. Which was that you're invisible because you let yourself be. Not because you lack capability, but because you've accepted a narrative about your value that's based on other people's limitations, not your own. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. That's easy to say when you're you. It is. And you're right to call it out. I have resources you don't have, options you don't have. She paused. But here's what: I also have scars from making wrong choices early on, from trusting people who saw me as a means to an end, from almost losing everything because I didn't understand the difference between opportunity and exploitation. When she looked at him, your firm is offering you exploitation with better packaging. I'm offering you actual opportunity, but only if you can see the difference clearly enough to choose. Daniel's voice came out raw. And if I choose wrong, then you spend the next decade building someone else's wealth while they pay you just enough to keep you grateful. Your kids grow up watching you disappear into work that doesn't value you. And eventually you become exactly what they think you are: someone who's useful but not essential. Someone who can be replaced the moment the relationship with me goes away. The words hit harder than Daniel expected. He looked down at the sand, at the water washing over his feet, at the shell fragments scattered along the waterline. His voice was barely above a whisper. I can't afford to make the wrong choice. I know. I have 3 kids depending on me. If I burn the bridge at the firm and whatever you're offering doesn't work out, then you'll find another job. You're exceptional, Daniel. The market doesn't stop needing exceptional people just because one opportunity doesn't pan out." She paused. "But I understand the fear. Single parent, sole provider, no safety net. The risk calculus is different for you than for someone who can afford to fail. So what do I do?" You decide what you're optimizing for, security or growth, playing it safe or building something real. There's no wrong answer, just different costs. They walked back toward the house in silence. When they reached the deck, lunch had appeared at some point: sandwiches, fruit water with lemon slices floating in a glass pitcher. Victoria gestured to the table. "Eat something. You look like you've been running on coffee and stress." Daniel sat down, took a sandwich without really tasting it. Victoria watched him with that same analytical intensity she brought to everything. "Tell me about your kids." "Why?" "Because they're part of the equation. I want to understand what you're actually weighing." Daniel put down the sandwich. "Lily's 9. She's smart. Scary smart sometimes. Reads at a 12th grade level. Wants to be a marine biologist or a lawyer depending on the day. She's also the one who holds everything together when I'm not there. Takes care of the twins. Makes sure homework gets done. Remembers things I forget. She shouldn't have to do that. She should just get to be 9. But she does it anyway because someone has to, and she's figured out that someone is her." He picked at the crust of his sandwich. "The twins are different. Jacob's all energy. He doesn't walk anywhere he runs. Talks constantly. Wants to know how everything works. Sarah's quieter, more watchful. She notices things. Feelings mostly. If I'm stressed, she knows before I say anything. She'll just come sit next to me without talking, like she's trying to absorb some of it." He looked up at Victoria. "Their mother left when they were 2 months old. Just walked out one morning and never came back. No explanation, no contact since. Lily remembers her a little. The twins don't remember her at all." Victoria's voice was quiet. "That's a lot to carry." "It's what it is. I don't have the luxury of falling apart about it. They need stability, routine, someone who shows up every single day. So that's what I do. I show up. Even when it costs you. Especially then." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "My mother left too. Not the same way, didn't abandon us. But she checked out emotionally when I was about Lily's age. Depression, pills, whatever she needed to not feel things. My father was too busy with his own problems to notice, so my grandfather raised me, taught me everything that mattered." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It made me who I am. Just like what you're going through is making Lily who she'll become. The question is whether you're building a life that shows her strength looks like suffering, or strength looks like choosing better even when it's hard." Daniel felt that land somewhere deep. "You think I'm choosing to suffer? I think you're choosing safety over possibility because you're afraid, which is human. But it's not strategic." "What would be strategic? Taking the risk that actually builds the life you want instead of just maintaining the life you have." She leaned forward. "Here's what I'm offering. Clearly and specifically, senior analyst position at Ashford Capital. Base salary, $185,000. Bonus structure tied to performance conservatively, another $75,000 annually if you're doing the work I think you're capable of. Health insurance that actually covers things. Child care stipend. Flexible schedule so you can be there for your kids when it matters. And most importantly, work that uses your full capability, not just the parts convenient for someone else's advancement." The numbers made Daniel's breath catch. That was more than triple his current salary. That was private school if the kids needed it. That was moving out of the cramped apartment. That was breathing room he hadn't had in 6 years. His voice was hoarse. "Why would you pay me that much?" "Because that's what you're worth. And because paying people properly is cheaper than replacing them when they figure out they're being underpaid." She sat back. "But it's not charity. I expect output. I expect you to challenge me when you think I'm wrong. I expect you to build models and analyses better than what I can get anywhere else. If you can't do that, the job goes away. Clear?" "Clear." "So what's your answer?" Daniel looked at her. This woman who'd spent months talking to him anonymously, who'd looked into him, who'd shown up at a gala and changed his life in one gesture. He thought about Graham's office, about Robert's managed smile, about Patricia's polite threats. He thought about Lily asking why he was being different, weird. He thought about the legal pad on his kitchen table covered in calculations that only measured half of what mattered. The words came out measured, "I need 24 hours." Victoria nodded. "Fair, but know this, your firm is going to keep pushing. They'll make it seem like turning down their offer is career suicide. They might even threaten to fire you if they think you're seriously considering leaving. Don't let them bully you into deciding out of fear. And if they do fire me, then they're proving my point about what you're worth to them, and you'll land somewhere better." She stood. "David will drive you back. Think about it clearly, not emotionally, not out of fear, but strategically. What builds the life you actually want?" The drive back was quiet. Daniel stared out the window, watching the expensive neighborhoods give way to commercial districts, then to downtown where Sterling's building sat among a dozen others that looked exactly the same. David pulled up to the curb. "Good luck." There was something in his tone that suggested he knew more about what Daniel was dealing with than his job description required. Daniel went upstairs, walked through the office to his desk, and found Graham waiting for him. Graham's expression was tight. "We need to talk, not a request." They went to the same conference room as yesterday. This time it was just the two of them. Graham closed the door, didn't sit down. "Where were you?" "Lunch." "For 3 hours." "I had things to think about." Graham crossed his arms. "Robert's pissed, Daniel. Patricia's pissed. We gave you an opportunity and you're acting like we did something wrong." "You did." "How?" "By offering you a promotion, by recognizing your value, by only recognizing it after you thought I could get you something you wanted." Graham's jaw tightened. "You know what, I'm done playing nice. Here's the reality: you turned down this promotion. You're making an enemy of everyone who matters at this firm. And in case you've forgotten, this industry is small. People talk. You think you're going to walk into some other position if you burn us. You think Victoria Ashford is going to save you." Daniel's voice stayed level. "I think I'm going to make a decision based on what's best for me and my kids, not based on what's convenient for you." Graham leaned against the table. "Your kids." "Right. Let me tell you about your kids, Daniel. They need stability. They need a father who has a job, health insurance, a future. You walk away from this firm, you're gambling with their security. Is that what a good father does?" Something cold settled over Daniel. "Don't talk about my kids. Someone needs to, because you're about to make a choice that hurts them, based on pride, based on principle. Same thing, and principles don't pay rent." Graham moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. "You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer disappears, and so does your position here. We'll find a reason. Restructuring, performance issues, whatever we need. But you'll be gone." He left. Daniel sat in the empty conference room for a long time, phone in his pocket, decision crystallizing into something sharp and clear and terrifying. They were threatening him, not subtly, not with corporate language, actually threatening him, which meant Victoria had been right about everything. He pulled out his phone, typed to Victoria, "They just threatened to fire me if I don't accept by tomorrow morning." The response came 30 seconds later. "Do you want me to make a call?" "Daniel, number Victoria." "You sure I can make this go away?" "Daniel, I'm sure. I need to handle this myself." "Victoria, okay, but the offer stands regardless of what happens tomorrow. You're not alone in this." Daniel stared at that last sentence. When had anyone last said that to him? When had anyone last meant it? That night, after the kids were asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and started drafting an email. Not to Graham, not to Robert, to himself. A list of everything he'd contributed to Sterling over the last 6 years. Every model, every analysis, every project that had led to deals he never got credit for. The list was long. The value was undeniable. And none of it had mattered until someone from outside told them to look. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, you're still thinking. That's good. Take your time." But don't let fear make the decision. Daniel, how do you know I'm thinking, Victoria? Because I know how you think. You're building a model right now, running scenarios, trying to quantify risk. Daniel, is that wrong, Victoria? No. It's exactly right. Just make sure you're measuring the right variables. Daniel, which are, Victoria? What you're building versus what you're trading. Some things don't fit on a spreadsheet. Daniel stared at the message. Then he looked at the numbers on his legal pad. Then he looked at the door to his kids' bedrooms. He typed, I need to talk to you. Not about the job. About how you knew. Victoria knew what Daniel. That I was worth finding. Victoria, I'll tell you. But not over text. Tomorrow. Lunch again. Daniel. Okay. Victoria. Wear comfortable shoes. Daniel. You keep saying that. Victoria. Because where we're going next matters. Daniel put his phone down, turned off the light, and sat in the dark kitchen of his too-small apartment, feeling something shift inside him that didn't have a name yet, but felt like the moment before a decision becomes irreversible. Tomorrow he'd talk to Victoria. Tomorrow he'd figure out what he was actually choosing between. But tonight, in the quiet darkness with his children sleeping and the numbers still scattered on his legal pad, Daniel Pierce understood something with perfect clarity. Being invisible wasn't the cost of survival. It was what happened when you let other people decide what you were worth. And maybe it was time to stop letting them. The next morning started the way every morning started: chaos, barely contained. But Daniel moved through it with a clarity that felt almost physical, like he'd stepped from underwater into open air. Lily watched him over her cereal. Those careful eyes that missed nothing. You're different again. Different how? I don't know. Less worried, maybe. Like you're not always thinking about something else. I'm trying to be better about that. You always promise that. I know, but this time I mean it. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, but if you're going to be late, can you at least text? So I know it's scary when you just don't come home and I don't know why. Something in his chest cracked. Deal. I'll always text. By the end of drop-off, his phone showed 7 missed calls from Sterling. He deleted the notifications without listening to the voicemails and drove to the office for what he already knew would be the last time. Graham was waiting at his desk when he arrived. The careful neutrality from yesterday was gone, replaced by something harder. Morning. You ready to talk? Yeah. Conference room C. Robert and Patricia were already there, arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Robert's voice carried that managing director smoothness. So, have you thought about our conversation? Daniel sat down, looked at each of them in turn. I have. I'm declining the promotion, and I'm resigning. Effective immediately. The room went still. Patricia recovered first. I'm sorry, what? I'm resigning. Today's my last day. Graham leaned forward. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Robert's expression hardened by degrees. Daniel, I think you're making a mistake. A significant one. We're offering you. I know what you're offering, and I'm saying no. Graham's voice came out sharp. Because of Victoria Ashford. Because I'm worth more than you're willing to pay. And I found someone who agrees. Patricia's tone went cold. You understand that leaving this firm under these circumstances will have consequences. We don't take kindly to people who refuse to let you exploit their relationships, who won't compromise themselves to make you money. Daniel stood up. I've spent 6 years producing exceptional work for this firm, work that won you clients, made you money, built your reputation, and the only time you noticed was when you thought you could use me to get something you wanted. That's not opportunity, that's extraction, and I'm done being extracted from. Graham stood too. You walk out that door, you're done in this industry. We'll make sure of it. Daniel's voice came out quiet but certain. No, you won't. Because if you try, Victoria Ashford will bury you so deep you'll never find your way back out. And you know it. Robert raised a hand. Let's all calm down. Daniel, I understand you're emotional right now. I'm not emotional, I'm clear. For the first time in years, I'm completely clear. He pulled his laptop from his bag, his phone, his security badge, set them on the table. That's everything. I'll need my personal items from my desk, and then I'm gone. Patricia's jaw was tight. You're obligated to give 2 weeks' notice. Sue me. He walked out, went to his desk, packed the photo of his kids, the coffee mug Lily had made in art class, a notebook full of ideas nobody here had ever asked about. Owen appeared at his cubicle. Dude, what's happening? I'm leaving. Like, leaving? Leaving. Yeah. For where? Ashford Capital. Owen's eyes went wide. You're serious? Completely. Damn, that's wow. Good for you, man. Really. Daniel looked at him. Thanks. For what it's worth, I always thought you were better than this place. Then why didn't you say something? Owen hesitated. Because I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think anyone was listening. Someone was. You just didn't see her. Daniel picked up his box, walked toward the elevator. People were staring now, whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. Graham intercepted him at the elevator bank, voice low and tight. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You think Victoria Ashford actually cares about you? You're a novelty to her. A project. 6 months from now, when she gets bored, you'll be right back where you started. Except you won't be able to come back here. Daniel pressed the elevator button. You're wrong about her, and you're wrong about me, but keep telling yourself whatever makes this easier. The elevator arrived. He stepped in. Graham stayed in the hallway, face red, looking like a man watching something valuable slip away, and finally understanding it was his fault. The doors closed. Daniel rode down to the lobby, walked out into the Miami morning, put his box in the trunk of his car, and sat behind the wheel for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called Victoria. Her voice came through immediately. It's done. It's done. How do you feel? Terrified. Relieved. Like I just jumped off something high and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. That's normal. The fear means you did something real. A pause. Take the rest of the day. Be with your kids. Monday morning, 9 a.m., my office. We'll start building something that actually matters. Victoria? Yeah. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else did. Thank you for being worth seeing. Now go. Your kids need to hear that their dad just did something brave. The call ended. Daniel sat in his car box of personal items in the trunk, whole life suddenly different, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not the desperate kind that comes from wishing things were different, but the real kind that comes from knowing you're moving towards something better and having the courage to actually take the step. He drove to Lily's school and signed her out early. The receptionist gave him a curious look but processed the paperwork without questions. Lily came to the office with her backpack. What's wrong? Is someone sick? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to spend the afternoon with you. You never pick me up early. I know. I should do it more often. They got ice cream and sat in the park where the twins would later play. Lily ate her cone slowly, still watching him with those careful eyes. You quit your job. It wasn't a question. Daniel had learned not to underestimate what his 9-year-old daughter could read from context clues and parental body language. I did. Because of the lady, the one from the party. Because of a lot of things. But yeah, she offered me a better job. Lily considered this. Is it actually better? Like really better? Yeah, Lil, it's actually better. Good. Because I like it when you're not stressed all the time. You're nicer. I'm always nice. You're always trying to be nice. That's different. Daniel looked at his daughter. This person who saw everything and understood more than she should have to at 9 years old. When did you get so smart about people? I've always been smart about people. You just don't usually ask. They sat in the sun until it was time to pick up the twins, and for the first time in months, Daniel wasn't mentally running through work calculations or client deadlines or which project was about to blow up in his face. He was just there, fully present, watching his daughter finish her ice cream and talk about the science project she'd completed and the book she was reading about ocean ecosystems. That weekend, he took them to the beach. Not the expensive part where Victoria's house sat behind privacy gates, but the public access point where families spread blankets and kids built sandcastles and the water was the same endless blue. Jacob ran into the waves with the fearlessness of a 6-year-old who hadn't learned to be afraid of things yet. Sarah built an elaborate castle with towers and a moat, narrating the entire construction process to herself. Lily waded in up to her knees and stood there letting the water pull sand from under her feet, face turned toward the horizon. Daniel watched them from his blanket, feeling the particular weight of single parenthood, the knowledge that he was the only thing standing between them, and disaster that every choice he made rippled out to affect 3 other lives in ways he couldn't always predict. His phone buzzed. Victoria. How are you doing, Daniel? Good. At the beach with the kids? Victoria. Good. That's where you should be. Monday will come soon enough. Daniel. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not as good as you think I am, Victoria? Then we'll find out together. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'm rarely wrong about people. Daniel rarely isn't, never. Victoria. No. But the risk of being wrong about you is worth taking. Now stop spiraling and be with your kids. They're only this age once. He put his phone away and called the kids back for lunch sandwiches. He'd packed fruit that was starting to get warm, water bottles sandy from being set down in the beach. They ate and played and got sunburned despite his best efforts with sunscreen. And when they finally drove home in the late afternoon, all 3 kids fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted in that good way that comes from a full day outside. Daniel carried them in one by one, got them through baths and dinner and the evening routine, and by the time they were in bed he was exhausted too. But it was a different kind of tired than the bone-deep depletion that had characterized the last 6 years. Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. He dressed in his suit, dropped the kids at school and daycare with the usual chaos, and drove to the glass tower downtown where Ashford Capital occupied the top 15 floors. The lobby was all marble and clean lines, and the particular kind of quiet that comes from places where serious money moves. The receptionist looked up as he approached. Daniel Pierce, Victoria Ashford is expecting me. She smiled. Of course, I'll take you up. A private elevator that required a key card. A ride to the 55th floor in silence. The doors opened onto a hallway that overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Victoria's office was at the end. The door was open. She looked up from her computer. You're early. Good habit. Old habit. Those are often the same thing. Come in. Close the door. Her office was huge but not ostentatious. Windows on 2 walls, minimal furniture, everything functional and clean. How are you feeling? Daniel's honesty surprised him. Terrified. Also good. Fear means you care. She stood up, gestured to the window. See that building there, 3 blocks south? The brown one. Yeah. That's where Sterling is. You can see it from here every day if you want. Reminder of what you walked away from. Why would I want that reminder? Because forgetting where you came from makes you soft, and I need you sharp. She turned back to him. Here's how this works. You're reporting directly to me for the first 3 months. I want to see how you think in real time, how you handle pressure, whether you can actually do what I think you can do. After that, assuming things go well, you'll move into the advisory division full-time with your own team. My own team. Eventually. First, you have to prove you can build the frameworks they'll work from. She walked over to her desk, picked up a folder, handed it to him. This is the Cordova account. Your old firm landed it, remember? Except the model you built was incomplete. They presented the pretty version, skipped the risk analysis because it didn't support the story they wanted to tell. Client signed anyway because they trusted the firm's reputation. Daniel opened the folder, scanned the first few pages. This is going to collapse. I know. Question is when and how badly. I want you to build a complete analysis. Full risk modeling, stress testing, scenario planning. Everything you would have done if anyone at Sterling had actually asked you to finish the work. Why? Because Cordova's CFO is a friend. And in about 6 months, when the model Sterling sold them starts showing cracks, I'm going to offer them something better, which means I need something better ready. Daniel looked up at her. You're going to poach their client. I'm going to offer a client superior analysis when their current provider proves inadequate. Not the same thing. Feels pretty close. Does it bother you? Daniel thought about Graham's face in the elevator, about Robert's polite threats, about 6 years of being invisible. No, not even a little. Good. Then get started. You've got an office on 53. Linda will show you down. She sat back down at her computer, already moving on to the next thing. Then she looked up again. Daniel. Yeah. Don't hold back. I didn't hire you to be careful. I hired you to be right. He spent the first week buried in the Cordova analysis, pulling apart the model Sterling had built and finding exactly what he'd suspected, a framework designed to support a conclusion rather than test it. The numbers were technically accurate, but strategically misleading, optimized to make the client feel confident rather than informed. It was the kind of thing that would work fine until it didn't, and then it would fail spectacularly. Daniel rebuilt it from scratch, running scenarios Sterling had ignored, stress testing assumptions they'd taken for granted, mapping risk vectors they'd either missed or deliberately omitted. The work was absorbing in a way work hadn't been in years, challenging, complex, the kind of problem that required complete focus and didn't leave room for anything else. He worked late most nights, later than he should have, until Victoria sent him a message Wednesday evening. Go home. Your kids need you more than this analysis does. He looked at his watch. 8:47. He'd missed dinner, missed bedtime, missed everything that mattered because he'd gotten lost in the work. He packed up immediately, drove home faster than he should have, and found Mrs. Valdez on his couch watching TV while his kids slept. I'm sorry, I lost track of time. It's fine. They ate, homework's done, everyone's in bed. I'll pay you extra. Daniel, stop. You're starting a new job. You're allowed to work late, just don't make it a habit. I won't. She left. Daniel stood in the quiet apartment, feeling the familiar guilt settle over him like a blanket he couldn't shake off. He checked on the kids, all three asleep, peaceful, unaware that their father was already making the same mistakes in a new place that he'd made in the old one. His phone buzzed. Victoria. You made it home, Daniel? Yeah. Kids were already asleep. Victoria. That's going to happen sometimes. Don't spiral about it. Daniel. How did you know I was spiraling, Victoria? Because I know how you think, and because guilt is useless. Better to just show up tomorrow and do better. Daniel. Is that what you do, Victoria? I don't have kids. I get to be as obsessive as I want. You don't. Remember that. He did better the next day, leaving at 6 to pick up the kids himself, making dinner, sitting with them through homework and bath time and bedtime stories. Lily watched him carefully, like she was testing whether this new version of their life was real or temporary. Your new job is busy. It is, but I'm going to get better at balancing, I promise. You always promise that. I know, but this time I mean it. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, but if you're going to be late, can you at least text? So I know it's scary when you just don't come home and I don't know why. The repetition of her earlier request hit him harder than it should have. Deal. I'll always text. By the end of the second week, Daniel had finished the Cordova analysis. It was brutal, thorough, and undeniable, a complete teardown of the model Sterling had presented, with detailed explanations of every place where they'd prioritized narrative over accuracy. He sent it to Victoria late on a Friday afternoon, then sat back and waited. She called him 10 minutes later. Come up to my office. When he got there, she had the analysis open on 3 monitors, moving through it with the focused intensity she brought to everything. This is exceptional. Exactly what I needed. Thanks. I'm serious. This is the level of work most firms can't produce even when they're trying. And you did it in 2 weeks while adjusting to a new position. She finally looked at him. How confident are you in the conclusions? Completely. The model they built works in a narrow range of conditions. Outside that range it falls apart, and the conditions are already shifting. Timeline. 6 months if the market stays stable. 3 if there's volatility. And your recommendations. Complete restructuring, different risk allocation, different hedging strategy, different underlying assumptions. It's not a small fix, it's a rebuild. Victoria smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who just confirmed a suspicion and was about to act on it. Perfect. I'm presenting this to Cordova's CFO next week. I want you there. As what? As the person who built it. I'm not taking credit for your work, Daniel. That's not how I operate. The meeting with Richard Cordova happened the following Wednesday in a conference room on the 55th floor. Richard was in his late 40s, sharp-eyed and skeptical, the kind of person who'd built a career on not being fooled. He sat across from Daniel and Victoria with the analysis open on a tablet in front of him. His voice came out flat after reading the executive summary. This contradicts everything Robert Chen told me. Victoria's tone stayed calm. I know, because Robert was selling you a story, not giving you analysis. You're saying Sterling lied to me. I'm saying they optimized for comfort over accuracy. There's a difference, but the result is the same. You're exposed in ways you don't understand. Richard looked at Daniel. You built the original model, the one they presented. A version of it. They asked me for preliminary analysis. I gave them the framework. They took it and simplified it until it supported the outcome they wanted. Why? Because complete analysis showed risk they didn't want to explain. Easier to skip it than address it. And you let them. Daniel met his eyes. I didn't have a choice. Junior analyst, no authority, no access to the client. I built what they asked for. What they did with it was out of my hands. Until now. Until now. Richard scrolled through the analysis, and Daniel could see him processing, recalculating, recognizing the truth of what he was reading. You're confident in this? Completely. And you're saying if we don't restructure, we're looking at significant losses in 6 months? Yes, maybe sooner. How significant? Daniel glanced at Victoria, who nodded. Conservatively 30 to 40% of portfolio value. Worst case 70. The room went very quiet. Richard put down the tablet. That's catastrophic. Victoria leaned forward slightly. It's avoidable, but it requires action now, not later. What kind of action? Full restructuring, new strategy, new risk model, new execution framework. We can handle it, but it's not a small project. She slid a proposal across the table. This is what we're offering. Complete portfolio advisory, direct access to Daniel and the team he'll be building, quarterly reviews, real-time risk monitoring, everything your current firm should have been doing from the start. Richard read the proposal carefully. Then he looked at Daniel again. You left Sterling for this. I did. Why? Because I was tired of watching good work get wasted by people who cared more about closing deals than serving clients. And you think Victoria's different? I know she is. She hired me to be right, not to make her look good. That's the difference. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. I need to discuss this with my board, but I'll be honest, what you've shown me here is concerning. Very concerning. It should be. That's the point. I'll be in touch by Friday. He called Thursday afternoon and scheduled a signing meeting for Monday. When Daniel got the news, he sat at his desk staring at the email confirmation, trying to process what had just happened. He'd poached a client from Sterling. Not just any client, a major account, the one they'd celebrated landing 2 months ago. And he'd done it by being right when they'd chosen to be comfortable. His phone buzzed. Graham's number. Daniel almost didn't answer. Then he did. Graham's voice was tight with rage. You son of a bitch! Graham, you poached Cordova. I provided them with better analysis. You stole our client. Your client chose to leave because your analysis was incomplete. That's not theft. That's consequence. We're going to bury you for this, ethically, legally, whatever it takes. You signed an NDA. You had access to proprietary information. Daniel kept his voice level. I signed an NDA covering your firm's internal processes, not my own work. The model I built for Cordova was mine before you ever touched it. And the new analysis I gave them is completely original. Your lawyers already know this, by the way. Victoria had them check. You think you're protected because you're working for her. You're not. She's using you, Daniel, and when she's done, you'll have nothing. Is that what you tell yourself, that anyone who values my work must be using me? I tell myself the truth. which is that you're not as special as you think you are. You got lucky. That's all. Daniel felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. You know what, Graham? You're right. I did get lucky. I got lucky that someone finally saw what I was capable of instead of what was convenient. I got lucky that I had the courage to leave when you tried to exploit me. And I got really lucky that you're exactly as mediocre as I always suspected, because it makes this so much easier. He hung up. His hands were shaking, not from fear this time, from something else. Something that felt like anger mixed with vindication and the particular satisfaction that comes from being proven right. Victoria appeared in his doorway. Graham called you. How did you know? Because he called Robert. Robert called me. Whole chain of panic. She leaned against the doorframe. How do you feel? Good. Better than I should, probably. You're allowed to feel good. You just proved that everything they said about you was wrong. That's worth celebrating. They're going to come after me. Let them try. We have better lawyers, more resources, and the truth on our side. They'll make noise for a few weeks, then move on to the next person they can exploit. She paused. But I need you to understand something. This is only the beginning. You just proved you can execute at this level. Now I need you to do it again, and again, until it stops feeling like vindication and starts feeling like Tuesday. That's the standard. Excellence is baseline, not exception. She paused. Can you do that? Daniel thought about his old cubicle, about 6 years of invisible work, about Graham's face in the elevator. Then he thought about Lily asking if they were okay about the twins sleeping peacefully while he worried about building a life instead of just surviving one. Yeah, I can do that. Good, because I'm about to make your life more complicated. She dropped a folder on his desk. Inside were profiles of 6 analysts, all younger than Daniel, all impressive on paper. These are your team. They start in 2 weeks. You're going to train them, lead them, build the advisory division from the ground up. Think you're ready? Daniel looked at the profiles, at the credentials and experience and potential sitting in front of him. I don't know. I've never managed anyone before. Neither had I when I started. You'll figure it out. She turned to leave, stopped at the door. Oh, and Daniel, your old firm is presenting to another potential client next week. Manufacturing company, big portfolio, lots of exposure. I want you to build a counter-analysis. Same thing you did with Cordova. Show them what they're missing. You want me to poach another one. I want you to offer better service to people who deserve it. If that happens to hurt Sterling's business, that's just market forces at work. She left. Daniel sat alone in his office looking at the profiles of his future team, thinking about the analysis he'd just been asked to build, processing the fact that his life had changed so completely in 3 weeks that he barely recognized it. His phone buzzed. Lily texting from school with Mrs. Valdez's phone. Can we get pizza tonight? I finished my science project. Daniel. Yes, I'll pick it up on the way home. Lily. You're not working late. Daniel. Not tonight. Tonight is pizza and science projects. Lily promise. Daniel promise. He left the office at 5:30, picked up pizza from the place the kids loved, got home while they were still doing homework at the kitchen table. The twins looked up in surprise. Sarah's voice carried genuine shock. You're early. Promised your sister we'd celebrate her project. You remembered? Of course I remembered. She smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. They ate pizza, and Lily explained her project about ocean ecosystems, while Jacob and Sarah asked questions that ranged from brilliant to completely absurd. Daniel listened to all of it, present and focused and grateful for this moment of normalcy in the middle of everything changing. Later, after the kids were asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and started building the analysis Victoria had asked for. This time he set a timer, gave himself 2 hours, and when it went off, he stopped working regardless of where he was in the process. Progress over perfection. Sustainable over exceptional. It was a new kind of discipline, and it was harder than he'd expected. But he was learning. 3 months into his position at Ashford Capital, Daniel got a call he wasn't expecting. Sterling Financial wanted a meeting. Not Robert. He'd been quietly pushed into early retirement after the board finally acknowledged that his leadership had cost them millions. Not Graham. He'd moved to a smaller firm in Atlanta, still trying to convince himself he was better than his results suggested. But Patricia Brennan, the COO who'd survived the carnage and was apparently making one last attempt at damage control. Her voice came through his phone with that practiced corporate diplomacy. "We'd like to discuss a potential collaboration." "What kind of collaboration?" "Perhaps better discussed in person. Are you available this week?" Daniel almost said no automatically, then reconsidered. Victoria had taught him that information was always valuable, even when it came from people you didn't trust. "Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock, your offices." "Actually, we were hoping you might come to us." "Neutral ground, your offices or nowhere, Patricia. I'm done pretending we're equals negotiating in good faith." There was a pause. "Thursday at 3 then. I'll send you the conference room details." When Daniel mentioned it to Victoria that evening, she looked up from the portfolio analysis she was reviewing and raised an eyebrow. "They want something." "Question is what?" "Maybe they're finally ready to acknowledge they screwed up." Corporations don't acknowledge mistakes. They restructure around them and pretend the problem never existed. She closed her laptop. "But go. Listen to what they're offering. Just don't agree to anything without running it past me first." "You think it's a trap?" "I think it's Patricia Brennan trying to salvage a firm that's hemorrhaging clients and credibility, which makes it unpredictable." She paused. "Want me to come with you?" "No, I need to do this myself." "Okay. But Daniel, whatever they offer, remember that you don't owe them closure. You don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them anything except professional courtesy, and barely that." Thursday afternoon. Daniel walked into the building where he'd spent 6 years being invisible, rode the elevator to the floor where his old cubicle still probably sat empty or reassigned, and followed Patricia's assistant to a conference room that overlooked the city. Patricia was already there, along with 2 people Daniel didn't recognize: a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and the kind of watch that cost more than most people's cars, and a younger woman with sharp eyes and a legal pad covered in notes. Patricia extended her hand. "Daniel, thank you for coming. This is Robert Kessler, our new managing director, and Claire Martinez from Strategic Planning." Robert stepped forward with practiced confidence. "Mr. Pierce, I've heard a lot about you." "I'm sure you have." "Please sit. Can we get you anything, coffee, water?" "I'm fine. What's this about?" Robert settled into his chair with careful positioning. "I'll be direct. The firm has undergone significant changes since you left. Changes that include a hard look at how we operate, how we value our people, how we structure our client relationships. Robert Chen's departure was part of that process." "Robert didn't depart. He was forced out." "The circumstances aren't relevant. What matters is that we're committed to building a better organization, one that recognizes talent instead of overlooking it." Daniel waited, saying nothing. Claire slid a document across the table. "We'd like to offer you a position, Senior Director of Quantitative Analysis. You'd have your own division, full autonomy over methodology and team structure, direct reporting to Robert. The compensation package is outlined here." Daniel glanced at the numbers. They were substantial, more than Victoria was paying him, though not by as much as they probably thought. "Why?" Robert's voice stayed smooth. "Because you're exceptional at what you do. Because we made a mistake letting you go. And because, frankly, we need someone with your capability if we're going to rebuild our competitive position. You don't need me. You need what I represent, the clients I've brought to Ashford, the reputation I'm building. You want me to bring that back here so you can tell your board you fixed the problem." Patricia leaned forward. "Daniel, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. The way you were treated was unacceptable, but this is a genuine offer. We're not trying to manipulate you." "Aren't you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, this looks exactly like manipulation. You ignored me for 6 years. You tried to exploit my relationship with Victoria Ashford. You threatened to sue me when I wouldn't play along. And now that I'm succeeding somewhere else, suddenly I'm valuable. You had 6 years to make this offer. You didn't. You waited until I was gone and proving you wrong. That tells me everything I need to know about what I'm worth to you." He stood up. "I'm not interested." Claire tried one more time. "At least look at the offer, the compensation alone." "I don't care about the compensation. I care about working with people who actually value me, not people who are trying to solve a PR problem." He pushed the document back across the table. "You had 6 years to make this offer. You didn't. You waited until I was gone. That tells me everything I need to know." Robert's expression hardened slightly. "You're making an emotional decision. I'm making a strategic one. The emotion just happens to align with the strategy." Daniel moved towards the door. Stopped. "You know what the difference is between here and Ashford? Capital Victoria hired me because she saw what I could do and wanted it for her firm. You're offering me a position because you're afraid of what I'm doing to yours. That's not value, that's fear. And I'm done being someone's crisis management." He left before any of them could respond, walked out of the building into the afternoon heat and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing. His phone buzzed. "Victoria." "How'd it go, Daniel?" "They offered me senior director. Big salary, own division, full autonomy." "Victoria." "And you said Daniel number, Victoria." "Good. Come back to the office. I have something to show you." When Daniel got back, Victoria was in her office with architectural plans spread across her desk. She looked up as he walked in. "New office space, 3 floors dedicated to the advisory division, your division." She pointed to sections of the blueprint, teamwork space here, individual offices for senior analysts here, conference facilities here. "We're breaking ground next month." Daniel stared at the plans. "This is because of 3 clients. This is because of the trajectory. We're not going to stay at 3 clients. We're going to scale to 30, then 50, then however many we can effectively serve. But that requires infrastructure, which means space, which means investment." She looked at him directly. "You built something real, Daniel. Now we're building the structure to support it. What if I can't sustain it? What if we hit a ceiling? Then we adjust. But you don't plan for failure. You plan for success and build capacity to handle it." She rolled up one of the blueprints. "Sterling just offered you a big position because they're scared. You turned it down because you understand the difference between being valued and being needed to solve someone else's problem. That's good judgment. Now I need you to apply that same judgment to what comes next, which is scaling. You've proven you can execute. You've proven you can lead a small team. Now you need to prove you can build an entire division, hire more people, develop more sophisticated frameworks, handle clients at a level most firms can't touch." She paused. "It's going to be harder than anything you've done so far, and you're going to fail sometimes. But that's the job. What if I fail badly?" It makes you wonder how often we judge people too quickly. Daniel Pierce spent 6 years being invisible, not because he lacked talent, but because he accepted other people's narrative about his worth. It took one person seeing him clearly to change everything. But sitting there on that park bench, Daniel understood something his daughter already knew. The right life doesn't arrive when the fear disappears. It begins when you choose to move forward while still carrying it. And somewhere in that choice, in the daily decision to show up to try to build something real despite the uncertainty, was where everything that actually mattered lived. Have you ever felt invisible at work? Have you ever had someone see your potential when everyone else overlooked you? Or maybe you're Daniel right now, stuck in a job that doesn't value you, wondering if you have the courage to leave. Tell us your story in the comments. I read every single one. And who knows, maybe your comment will be the push someone else needs to finally choose themselves.